On the day of Lu Group's annual shareholders meeting, the air conditioning in the conference hall was turned up high. On both sides of the long table, 43 shareholders sat in order. Nameplates lined the table neatly. The mineral water bottles reflected cold light. On the projection screen, the words Annual Business Review and Equity Optimization Resolution remained frozen. The atmosphere was so quiet it almost felt oppressive. Everyone was waiting for Clara Lu. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doors of the conference hall were pushed open from outside. The crisp sound of high heels striking the floor echoed through the room, one step after another, like knocks against everyone's nerves. Clara Lu wore a snow-white custom suit. Her long hair was pinned meticulously behind her head. Her lipstick was sharp. Her expression was cold and beautiful. When she reached the main seat, even her gaze carried her usual sense of superiority. Behind her followed Mason Chin. The man wore a perfect suit. Gold-rimmed glasses rested on his high nose bridge. His brows and eyes were gentle. He held a stack of documents and walked with steady grace, like a flawless secretary who would never make a mistake. Sitting in the far corner, Nathan Pei lifted his eyes and glanced once. His seat was extremely remote. So remote that he did not even have a nameplate. He looked like an idle observer, not the administrative director of Lu Group. But no one present truly dared to treat him as idle. Especially the old shareholders. They knew better than anyone that Lu Group's rise over the past 6 years appeared on the surface to be Clara Lu's decisive leadership. But every time the company faced life and death, they knew who had truly held it up from behind. Only that person never spoke of it. And Clara Lu never asked. The meeting begins. Clara pulled out the main seat and sat down, lifting a hand in signal. Mason immediately began distributing the materials. His movements were skilled, his smile appropriate. Shareholders, this is today's proposal. Please review it. Several shareholders opened the documents. The moment their eyes reached the final pages, their expressions changed at the same time. Someone frowned. Someone's fingers froze. Someone instinctively looked toward Nathan Pei in the corner. Nathan only leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. His long fingers rested on the edge of the document, as if he were reading an ordinary meeting file. Clara did not notice the shareholders' reactions. Or perhaps she simply did not care. What she wanted to do today was establish authority. Over the past 3 months, several key projects had not advanced as expected. Different voices had begun to appear both inside and outside the board. Especially Nathan Pei. As administrative director, he had recently rejected several of her proposals in public, especially those concerning Mason Chin's core permissions. She was extremely dissatisfied. In her eyes, Nathan had become increasingly unaware of his own place. He was merely an administrative director she had personally promoted. He held shares she had given him. He ate at Lu Group's table. Yet again and again, he dared to interfere with her decisions. Today, she would let everyone know who truly had the final say at Lu Group. Look at the third proposal first. Clara opened the microphone before her. Her voice was cold and clear, spreading through the speakers to every corner of the room. Regarding partial equity restructuring and management incentive arrangements, after board discussion, the following decision is announced. She lifted a hand and received a separately bound document from Mason. The 15% equity under Nathan Pei's name will be reclaimed due to failure to meet performance targets and long-term failure to make equivalent contributions to core operations. The sentence landed. The room went dead silent. The next second, it was as if a silent bomb had exploded inside the conference hall. 43 shareholders looked at one another. A few younger shareholders even suspected they had heard wrong and turned sharply to look at the older ones beside them. What they saw were iron-blue faces and tightly pressed lips. Clara seemed not to notice the strange silence. She continued reading. Her tone even carried a calmness that sounded like charity. This 15% equity will be transferred free of charge to the company's chief secretary, Mason Chin, as a special reward. She paused, looked at Mason, and admiration was obvious in her eyes. Thank you for your outstanding contributions to the company over the past 3 years. Boom. This time, even the suppressed whispers could no longer be contained. What kind of joke is this? 15% to a secretary? Has President Lu gone mad? Someone's voice stopped halfway. He swallowed the rest of the sentence and only dared communicate with his eyes. Because they all knew what that 15% represented. It was not an ordinary incentive share. 6 years ago, when Lu Group's capital chain broke and the company nearly collapsed, those shares came from the only truly life-saving money. That money was not from Lu Group. Not from Clara Lu. Not from any director present. It was from Nathan Pei. Only he had hidden his name too deeply over the years. So deeply that Clara truly believed the 15% was something she had given him. Mason had already stood at the perfect moment. He adjusted his glasses and smiled with flawless humility. His tone was modest beyond reproach. Thank you, President Lu, for your kindness. And thank you, shareholders, for your trust. I will continue working hard and will not disappoint the company or President Lu. After speaking, he bowed deeply to everyone. Anyone who did not know the truth might genuinely believe this was a reward everyone approved of. In the corner, an old shareholder finally could not hold back. The pen in his hand snapped against the table. Clara frowned and looked over. Director Zhao, is there a problem? Director Zhao opened his mouth. In the end, he only looked at Nathan, then swallowed all his words back. A problem? The problem was enormous. But the person who had the most right to speak had not opened his mouth. What could they say? Seeing that no one objected, Clara's lips lifted almost invisibly. She enjoyed the feeling of controlling the whole room. Especially controlling Nathan Pei. She turned her head, and her gaze finally landed on the silent man in the corner. Nathan Pei. Only then did the named man slowly lift his head. His expression was too calm. So calm it made Clara strangely uncomfortable. She had thought he would at least be angry. Lose control. Question her in front of everyone. But he did not. He only looked at her. His eyes were deep, like a cold lake with no visible bottom. Clara instinctively made her tone colder, as if trying to suppress that faint unease inside her. Do you have any objections? Every gaze in the room instantly focused on Nathan. Even Mason lifted his coffee and looked over with a gentle smile, as if waiting to watch a doomed struggle. However, Nathan only lowered his head and glanced at the equity change document in his hand. Black letters on white paper. Stamped with Clara Lu's president seal. He looked at it for 2 seconds. Then he suddenly gave a very soft laugh. The smile was faint, almost invisible. But several old shareholders felt their hearts sink at the same time. It was over. This time, it was truly over. Nathan gently closed the document and placed it back on the table. Then he stood. Slowly, he adjusted his cuffs. His movements were unhurried, as if he were doing something ordinary. The conference hall was so quiet that only the soft sound of fabric friction could be heard. Finally, he spoke. His voice was as calm as if he were reading meeting minutes. No objection. Clara froze. She had not expected him to give in so easily. But the next second, Nathan continued. The shares belong to the company. You decide. It sounded like compromise. But in the ears of the shareholders who knew the truth, it was a silent slap. The shares belonged to the company? No. They had never belonged to the company. At this moment, he was simply too tired to correct her. Nathan took a letter from the inner pocket of his suit and placed it neatly on the conference table. Also, I resign. Everyone's breathing stopped. Even the smile on Mason's face froze for an instant. Clara suddenly sat up straight. What did you say? My resignation letter. Nathan's tone was unchanged. Starting today, I will no longer serve as administrative director of Lu Group. Clara's face darkened instantly. She thought he was using resignation to threaten her. An administrative director really thought he was irreplaceable to Lu Group? Nathan Pei, think carefully. Her voice turned cold. Once you leave Lu Group, you are nothing. Nathan looked at her. His gaze was quiet, almost unfamiliar. Is that so? He asked only 2 words. For some reason, Clara felt something block her chest, as if she had been lightly stabbed. But she quickly pressed that feeling down and sneered. What else could you be? That 15% was never yours to begin with. I gave it to you. Now I'm taking it back. It is reasonable and proper. If you are throwing a tantrum over this, you will only make people look down on you. Nathan did not respond. Or rather, he no longer cared enough to respond. He only picked up the phone on the table, turned, and walked toward the conference hall doors. His steps were steady. No trace of reluctance. Let him go. Clara looked at his back and deliberately raised her voice, as if saying it for everyone present. He is only an administrative director. The company will keep running without him. She turned to Mason, and her tone softened. Mason, sit down. Now that you have shareholder status, you will have access to more businesses. The company needs truly capable people like you. Yes, President Liu. Mason smiled and sat down, looking even more composed. He even raised his coffee cup slightly toward Nathan's departing back. Like a toast to a loser whose defeat had already been decided. At the doorway, Nathan's steps paused slightly. Not because of Mason. Nor because of Clara. But because he suddenly felt that these 6 years of his life were absurdly laughable. 6 years ago, Liu Group's capital chain broke. Clara was forced to drink until her stomach bled at a business dinner, yet still clenched her teeth and said she did not want to rely on anyone. Back then, Nathan had fallen out with the Pei family and left home. He stood before her with all his personal assets and poured that money into Liu Group. She did not want to carry the reputation of relying on a man to rise. Fine. He placed the shares under her name and let her act as the nominee holder. She wanted to stand tall before the shareholders. Fine. He paved resources, connections, cooperation, and guarantees for her one by one, then stepped back behind her as an administrative director no one valued. She disliked the complicated rules of wealthy families and refused to make their marriage public. Fine. He stayed in a hidden marriage with her for 6 years. He thought that if he stepped back once, she would understand a little. If he yielded an inch, she would treasure that inch. But in the end, she truly believed that 15% was something she could reclaim at will and reward to anyone she pleased. Even reward it to a male secretary whose background Nathan had already found dirty long ago. Thinking of this, the last ripple in Nathan's eyes sank completely. He pushed open the door and walked out. The conference hall doors slowly closed behind him, shutting all the doubts, whispers, probing, and hypocritical applause into another world. The corridor was long. The lights were bright. His footsteps echoed clearly. His assistant, Cole Chen, was already waiting by the elevator. The moment he saw Nathan come out, he stepped forward and lowered his voice. Mr. Pei, the car is ready. The legal team and financial audit team are downstairs. We can begin procedures at any time. Nathan did not stop walking. He only gave a faint Cole followed beside him, his heart tightening. He had worked beside Nathan for 4 years. He knew too well that the calmer this man was, the bigger the matter. He had already heard roughly what happened inside the meeting room. He was so angry he nearly rushed in. That was Mr. Pei's own money. His own equity. Clara Liu actually dared reclaim it publicly and transfer it to Mason Chin. That was not merely a slap in the face. That was stabbing him to death. The elevator doors opened. Nathan stepped in and pressed the first floor. As the silver doors slowly closed, Cole finally could not help asking softly, "Mr. Pei, do we really act now?" Nathan looked at the changing floor numbers. His expression was terrifyingly calm. Doesn't she think the shares were given by her? Then let her see clearly what belongs to her and what does not. Notify legal. Proceed under nominee shareholding misappropriation and asset preservation. Every permission she signed away yesterday, suspend it today. Cole's heart shook. He immediately answered. Understood. The elevator continued descending. The numbers dropped floor by floor. Like a countdown. Back in the conference hall, Clara was still continuing the next procedures. She did not know that the moment she stamped the president's seal and gave Nathan's 15% to Mason Chin, what she pressed was not the confirmation key of power. It was the shutdown key of Liu Group. Even less did she know that she was currently standing at the highest point of her life while stepping on 6 years of one man's retreat and tolerance. And beneath that height, the foundation had already begun to collapse. At one side of the meeting table, an old shareholder slowly closed the document before him and sighed deeply. The person beside him whispered, "Director Zhao, what do we do next?" Director Zhao looked at Clara in the main seat. Then he looked at Mason's barely hidden smug face. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "What do we do? Wait. Wait until tomorrow. Then she will know what she reclaimed today. And what she gave away." After he said this, the conference room became even quieter. So quiet that even the sound of turning pages felt piercing. Sitting at the head of the table, Clara frowned almost invisibly. It was not that she did not hear. She simply could not be bothered to care. In her view, these old shareholders were simply too cautious. They could not stand her promoting young people. They could not stand her concentrating more power. But Lu Group had never reached this point because of their hesitation. It had reached this point because of her, Clara Lu. She tapped her finger lightly against the table, her tone colder. If Director Zhao has any objection to today's resolution, you may formally vote against it. There is no need for sarcasm. Director Zhao lifted his eyes and looked at her. His gaze was complicated. President Lu, don't worry. I do not object. He paused. His tone became meaningful. After all, this is your own decision. It sounded like surrender. But to Clara, it carried an inexplicable thorn. Before she could speak again, Mason smoothly took over. President Lu is doing this for the long-term development of the company. If any directors still doubt my ability, I am willing to prove myself through future results. His words were flawless. His posture was humble. Several younger executives immediately echoed him. Secretary Qin has indeed done a lot over the past 3 years. Overseas projects, financing roadshows, media relations, he performed very well. Equity incentives should go to capable people. There is nothing wrong with that. The wave of flattery softened Clara's expression. She liked this feeling. Everyone speaking in her direction. Every situation under her control. But just then, a secretary in the back row who was responsible for recording hurried to Mason's side and whispered a few words. Mason's composed expression changed slightly. Clara noticed immediately. What happened? Mason quickly regained calm and said softly. The legal department just sent word. When Nathan Pei left the company, he requested HR to process his resignation immediately. He also asked the administration department to transfer all permissions under his name. Clara sneered. He moves fast. She had thought Nathan's resignation was only a public gesture, a way to force her to withdraw the resolution. But now it seemed he truly intended to leave. Thinking of this, she did not panic. Instead, she found it funny. 6 years. He had stayed in Lu Group too long. So long that he truly thought he was irreplaceable. Only an administrative director. If he left, he left. Would the company collapse without him? Let him. Clara said lightly. If he wants to leave, let him leave cleanly. Clear out his office today. Cancel his access card, email, and system permissions. Then she looked at Mason. Especially the president's office and core data room. From now on, you take over. Mason's eyes lit up. Yes, President Lu. Again, a brief silence fell along the meeting table. Some lowered their heads to drink water. Some pretended to read documents. No one answered. That silence made Clara's discomfort grow. She suddenly realized everyone today was too quiet. It was as if they were watching a play. Or waiting for something. She did not want to think too deeply. Because once she did, she would think of Nathan's overly calm eyes before he left. That calmness did not look like defeat. It looked more like he was too tired to argue with her anymore. The thought sparked a nameless anger inside her. What she hated most was Nathan's look, as if he had seen through everything and cared about nothing. He was only an administrative director, yet he always watched her with that almost assessing gaze, as if she had done something wrong. What right did he have? Continue. She pressed down her irritation and opened the next proposal. But the rest of the meeting was no longer smooth. Several items that should have been approved on the spot were blocked by old shareholders saying they needed further consideration. A foreign acquisition case was suddenly questioned by finance regarding the guarantee structure. Even the personnel adjustment list was challenged indirectly. After Nathan left, who would cover the cross-department coordination projects he had originally handled? Every polite sentence was actually undermining her authority. Clara's face darkened more and more. Mason read the room and immediately said warmly. The work Director Pei handled before was actually very standardized in process. I should have no problem taking over. No need for everyone to worry too much. Standardized? Director Zhao lifted his eyelids and suddenly smiled. Secretary Qin, are you treating the mines Lu Group stepped on over the years as a few process nodes in a spreadsheet? The room stiffened. Mason's smile faded for a second before returning. I will humbly learn what Director Zhao means. You had better. Director Zhao said lightly. Some things, if you fail to learn them, can cost lives. Clara snapped the document shut. Enough. She looked at Director Zhao, her tone icy. This is a shareholders' meeting, not an old men's tea gathering. If anyone does not want to continue, you may leave now. That was an obvious order to shut up. Director Zhao said nothing else. He simply leaned back and closed his mouth. The meeting continued. But everyone knew it had changed in nature. When the meeting ended, it was almost noon. The 43 shareholders left one after another. No one surrounded Clara to flatter her. No one offered Mason many congratulations for his newly obtained 15%. On the contrary, the old shareholders all glanced toward the door before leaving, as if confirming that someone had truly left completely. Mason felt uncomfortable. He had thought today would be his glorious day. 15% equity was enough to pull him into the true core of Lu Group's power. But the envy, flattery, and goodwill he imagined never came. The way these people looked at him even carried a strange pity. As if they were watching a fool who had received a burning potato and was still proud of it. President Lu. He followed Clara and lowered his voice. Some of the old shareholders seem off, especially Director Zhao. Should I communicate with them privately? Clara walked toward the president's office in high heels, her expression cold. They're a group of old antiques. They can't stir up much trouble. You don't need to waste energy on them. She glanced sideways at Mason, her tone softening. You suffered today. This was originally a reward for you, but they ruined the mood. Mason immediately revealed a warm smile. I don't feel wronged. My value is helping President Lu share her burdens. That sentence indeed made Clara's expression soften further. Compared with Nathan, who always contradicted her, reminded her, and questioned her, she preferred someone like Mason. Sensible, considerate, and always standing on her side. The two had just reached the office door when an assistant hurried forward with a nervous expression. President Lu, something happened. Clara's brows jumped. What? The administrative director's office. Director Pei's people have already cleared out all his private documents. Also, the assistant hesitated. He asked Cole Chen to deliver a letter for you to receive personally. The assistant handed over a craft paper envelope with both hands. Clara accepted and casually opened it. There were only 2 documents inside. The first was the formal resignation letter. The second was a lawyer-stamped notice of confirmation of nominee shareholding relationship and reservation of rights. At first, Clara did not care. But when she saw the title clearly, her fingers paused. Nominee relationship? She frowned and flipped down. The black and white text stated clearly. 6 years ago, Lu Group accepted strategic capital injected in Nathan Pei's personal name. That capital corresponded to 15% equity. Based on agreement between both parties, the equity was temporarily registered under Clara Lu's name, with Clara acting as nominee holder. The actual rights holder and ultimate beneficiary was Nathan Pei. At the signature section, there were even lawyer witnessing numbers and filing information from that year. Clara's face sank instantly. What is this? The assistant lowered her head, not daring to speak. Mason took it and glanced at it. Then he pretended to stay calm and smiled. President Lu, this should just be Nathan Pei's last attempt to create pressure through lawyers because he can't accept losing. If he truly had such confidence, why didn't he dare say it at the meeting? That sentence gave Clara back a point of support. The brief fluctuation in her eyes was quickly replaced by anger. I knew it. She slapped the document onto the table and sneered. Resignation isn't enough. He still wants to use something like this to scare me. She was not unfamiliar with business tactics. People who lost loved digging up old disputes and using vague agreements to stir trouble. But she held the board resolution. She held today's shareholders' meeting record. She held the president's seal. Even if Nathan wanted to overturn this, how far could he go? Call the legal director. Clara said coldly. I want to see exactly how much legal force this so-called nominee notice has. The assistant left quickly. Mason looked at the document on the desk. Behind his glasses, his eyes flashed briefly. Then he silently looked away. He was more sensitive than Clara. He knew very well that once certain agreements truly existed, the consequences were not as simple as scaring people. But he could not panic now. At least, he could not panic in front of Clara. Soon, the legal director hurried in. The moment he took the document and read it, his face changed. It was not fake. It was the professional instinct of a lawyer seeing a high-risk legal document. Clara stared at him. Speak. The legal director swallowed. His tone was extremely careful. President Lu, from the form of this document, it is very complete. If Director Pei truly has the original nominee agreement, capital injection records, lawyer witnessing, and filing records, then legally, the 15% equity may not be freely disposable by the company. What do you mean, not freely disposable? Clara's face turned cold. The legal director forced himself to continue. It means today's resolution to reclaim and transfer the equity has serious defects. Once the other side initiates judicial procedures, Secretary Chen's transfer arrangement may be suspended directly. In serious circumstances, the company could face infringement and asset preservation risks. The office fell dead silent. Mason's fingers tightened. But he forced his face to remain calm. Isn't that a little exaggerated? It's just a nominee agreement. The legal director glanced at him but did not answer. He only looked at Clara. President Liu, I recommend immediately checking all original files from that year and contacting Director Pei privately to negotiate. If this goes to court, the impact will not be limited to 15%. Clara's face had become extremely ugly. Her first reaction was not fear. It was anger. The anger of being challenged and offended. How dare Nathan Pei? A man who had stayed by her side for 6 years had secretly kept such a move behind her back. Scenes from those 6 years flashed through her mind. Every time the company had a funding gap, someone silently filled it. Every time financing got stuck, it mysteriously went through. Every time she thought it was because she was capable, skilled, and decisive, Nathan had always stood nearby with that calm, indifferent look. Could it be? No. Impossible. If that 15% was truly his, why had he not said anything for 6 years? Why had he been willing to serve as an administrative director? Why had he been so calm at the meeting today? The more Clara thought, the more irritated and chaotic she became. Finally, she swept the document off the desk. Negotiate? She laughed coldly. Is he worthy? He just wants to create trouble before leaving. She looked at the legal director, her tone allowing no refusal. Check it. Check it now. I want to know whether his confidence is real or only bluffing. Yes. After the legal director left, only Clara and Mason remained in the office. Sunlight outside was dazzling, making the whole office bright and cold. Mason bent down and picked up the notice of reservation of rights. President Liu, don't be angry. No matter what happens, I stand with you. Looking at him, Clara's emotions eased slightly. She rubbed her brow and said in a low voice, "Come with me tonight." Mason's heart stirred. He immediately asked gently, "Where would you like to go?" Clara leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes briefly. A cold curve appeared at her lips. To celebrate. To celebrate that some people finally got out of my company. She said it with the same superiority as always. As if the person who left were truly only a replaceable administrative director. But only she knew that at this moment, a crack had quietly opened deep inside her heart. And through that crack, something she refused to admit kept emerging. Unease. The word pierced the most hidden part of her heart like tiny needles. She was clearly sitting in the center of the president's office, with a full wall of glass behind her and the city skyline outside. Yet she felt cold. She disliked this feeling. Even more, she refused to admit it. So she lifted her chin. Her tone became lighter. Harder. 9 tonight. Your place. A dark light flashed in Mason's eyes. He immediately suppressed his joy and answered softly. Okay. I'll prepare red wine. Clara no longer looked at him. She waved. Leave. The moment legal has results, tell me. Yes. After the office door closed, the room became suddenly quiet. Clara leaned back in her chair and stared at the document on the corner of the desk. She stared for a long time. The paper edge turned white under the sunlight, like a glaring tear through her once stable understanding of the world. She suddenly remembered Nathan's words before leaving. The shares belong to the company. You decide. At the time, she thought it was surrender. Hard words from someone who could not admit defeat. But thinking back now, there had been no reluctance in that tone. Instead, there was a faint irony. As if he were watching her act in a play even she did not understand. Clara's brows jumped. She picked up the internal phone on her desk. Send me the industrial registration files, the 6-year-old capital injection agreement, and the original board resolutions. Now. The secretary quickly answered. Within 20 minutes, the materials were delivered. Clara personally flipped through them. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. The more she read, the darker her face became. The timing of that capital injection 6 years ago matched exactly the most dangerous period in Lu Group. Back then, she had been busy dealing with creditors, banks, media, and board doubts. There had indeed been a large pile of documents packaged and sent to her by the legal and finance teams. She had only signed at the end. At the time, she remembered only one thing. The money came in. The company survived. As for the form of the capital, whose money it was, how the equity was registered, and who the actual rights holder was, she had not looked carefully. Because deep in her mind, she had always believed that turning point came from her own endurance. It was she, Clara Lu, who had held on. But now, inside the file folder, a witness letter from a law firm struck her like a slap. Witness matter. Mr. Nathan Pei injected personal assets into Lu Group. Ms. Clara Lu held the corresponding equity as nominee. Black and white. Clear. Clara's fingers tightened around the page until her knuckles turned white. How is this possible? She murmured almost inaudibly. For the first time, she did not feel anger. She felt absurdity. So absurd she almost wanted to laugh. 6 years. For 6 whole years. She had always thought that 15% was a gift she had given Nathan. A dignity and reward she had given to a husband. To an administrative director. But it turned out. From beginning to end, it had been his. She was only the nominee holder. The president's seal in her hand had not been exercising power when stamped on today's equity change document. It had been disposing of someone else's property without authorization. President Lu. The office door was knocked. The legal director walked in quickly, sweat visible at his forehead. Clara raised her head. Her face was terrifyingly cold. Speak. The legal director took a deep breath. It has been verified. The materials submitted by Director Pei. No, by Mr. Pei. Are all true. Industrial filings, lawyer archives, original capital flow records, nominee agreement, nothing is missing. Also, the other side's legal team is preparing an application for asset preservation. Preserve what? Clara's voice tightened suddenly. Based on your unauthorized disposal of nominee-held assets and infringement of the actual rights holder, they are applying to freeze the relevant equity and the company's main operating accounts. The air froze. Clara shot to her feet. Has he gone mad? The legal director lowered his head, not daring to respond. She paced around the office twice in high heels, her chest rising and falling violently. Then she suddenly sneered. Only a 15% equity dispute, and he wants to freeze the entire company account? Would the court approve that? If it were an ordinary dispute, not necessarily. The legal director hesitated. But the other side's lawyer is from the Pei Legal Center. Clara's steps stopped. What did you say? The Pei Legal Center. His voice became lower. I asked someone to verify it. The team contacting the court at noon today was the Pei family's chief legal team. The level is very high. It does not look like ordinary representation. The words, Pei family, fell like heavy hammers. For several seconds, Clara's mind went blank. Then she instinctively denied it. Impossible. What relationship does he have with the Pei family? The legal director opened his mouth, but did not dare speculate. He only said, we do not know yet. But President Lu, the urgent matter now is to contact Mr. Pei and negotiate a withdrawal. Once preservation lands, the company's cash flow will immediately face problems. Contact Nathan Pei. The words made Clara's face shift repeatedly. At noon, she had told everyone at the shareholders' meeting. Let him go. Without the company, he is nothing. Now, only a few hours later, she had to lower her head and find him. But the legal director was right. If she did not, the consequences would be worse. She gritted her teeth and dialed. His phone was off. She called again. Still off. Anger gathered in Clara's eyes, mixed with the humiliation of being ignored. She refused to believe it and called Cole Chen instead. This time, it connected. President Lu. Cole's voice was polite, almost mechanical. Clara suppressed her anger. Put Nathan Pei on the phone. Sorry. Mr. Pei is not available. Mr. Pei. Not Director Pei. Clara's brows jumped hard. Cole Chen, you had better know who you are speaking to. The other end was silent for 2 seconds. Then came an even calmer sentence. President Liu, I know very well. But you may not yet know what tone you should use now. The sentence pierced her pride like a blade. Clara's face turned iron blue. If you want to discuss the 15%, Cole interrupted, I suggest you first read all the original files, then think carefully about what you did at today's shareholders' meeting. After speaking, he hung up. The busy tone rang in Clara's ear. She almost crushed her phone in her hand. The legal director stood nearby, not daring to breathe. After a long while, Clara squeezed out a sentence through clenched teeth. Keep contacting them. No matter what, I want to see him before tonight. Yes. The legal director had just left when the financial director hurried in. His face looked worse than the legal director's. President Liu, bad news. 3 partner banks sent letters at the same time, demanding a re-review of our credit lines. Also, the bridge loan originally scheduled to arrive this afternoon has been temporarily suspended. What do you mean, suspended? Clara turned sharply. They said. The guarantor withdrew the commitment, so the funds cannot be released. Clara's heart sank. Guarantee again. For 6 years, Liu Group looked as if it had walked smoothly. But she knew very well that the company had been in danger at many key moments. It had only inexplicably escaped each crisis. She had always attributed that to her own luck, judgment, and execution. But what if? What if behind those inexplicable moments stood Nathan Pei? The thought chilled her back. The financial director continued. Also, Director Zhao and several other old shareholders just sent people to ask whether today's equity change resolution will be suspended. If not, they may jointly pursue responsibility against the president's office for major decision-making errors. They know too? Clara stared at him. The financial director moved his lips and nodded with difficulty. I'm afraid. Many people know. That sentence was harsher than any bad news. Many people knew. Only she did not. Or rather, only she had never cared to know. She suddenly remembered the silence of the 43 shareholders that morning. She remembered Director Zhao's words. Wait until tomorrow, and she will know what she reclaimed today and what she gave away. So it had not been a mystery. Everyone had been watching her make a fool of herself. She, the president, under the gaze of 43 pairs of eyes, had taken someone else's real 15% equity and gifted it to a secretary. Like a joke. Clara felt her chest clog. She raised her hand and swept the glass from the desk. With a crash, shattered glass scattered across the floor. Several secretaries outside trembled, but no one dared enter. Mason happened to push open the door at that moment. The moment he entered, he saw the mess on the floor and Clara's extremely dark face. His steps paused slightly. But he quickly resumed his usual gentle composure. President Liu, don't be anxious. He walked over, his voice soft. There is always a solution. Even if that 15% truly has issues, it may not be beyond repair. Clara stared at him, emotion surging in her eyes. This was the man she had personally lifted today. The man she had planned to celebrate with tonight. But now, even she was unsure whether that reward could truly land in his hands. Didn't you say Nathan Pei wouldn't dare fall out with me? She suddenly spoke. Her voice was cold and heavy. Mason's expression stiffened. He immediately explained. My judgment at the time was based on common sense. Who could have expected he would have a nominee agreement and even be able to use the Pei family's legal team? At this point, he seemed to suddenly realize something and displayed surprise at just the right time. President Liu, could Nathan Pei really be connected to the Pei family? Clara looked at him without speaking. Her mind was too chaotic to distinguish how much of Mason's surprise was real and how much was fake. Mason bent down smoothly and picked up the scattered documents from the floor. His tone became even gentler. Calm down first. The more chaotic things become, the more you cannot lose balance. I can help soothe the shareholders. I can also accompany you in sorting out legal and finance. If tonight feels too difficult for you to endure alone, I am here. In the past, such words would have comforted Clara. But today, when she heard them, she felt something was wrong for the first time. Too smooth. Too good at speaking. Every sentence landed exactly where she most needed soothing. But that suspicion flashed by and was quickly buried beneath reality. She had no room to care about details now. Her mind held only one thing. Before the accounts went wrong, she had to find Nathan Pei. She closed her eyes and sat back in her chair. Her voice was much more tired. Leave first. Tonight. As planned. A dark light crossed Mason's eyes. But on the surface, he nodded obediently. Okay. I'll wait for you. After he left, Clara sat alone in the empty office. The setting sun sank little by little. The glass curtain wall reflected her figure. Cold, powerful, untouchable. But only she knew that silhouette had begun to sway. At 6 in the evening, the entire senior management of Lu Group was covered by the low pressure of an approaching storm. Legal was running documents. Finance was chasing bank answers. The board office kept sending inquiry letters to the president's office. Even the front desk had heard rumors from the shareholders' meeting and whispered privately. Did she really give Secretary Chin 15%? I heard Director Pei resigned directly. It's not just resignation. My friend in legal said that equity originally belonged to Director Pei. Really? Then President Lu today. Shoo, keep your voice down. Do you not want your job? Rumors grew no matter how they were pressed down. Inside the president's office, Clara finally received a call back. Not from Nathan Pei. From Edward Lu. The moment the phone connected, the old man's voice was frighteningly heavy. Clara Lu. Come home immediately. Clara froze. Dad, I have company matters right now. I know you have company matters. Edward spoke word by word. I also know that today, in front of 43 shareholders, you reclaimed 15% equity under your husband's name and awarded it to a male secretary. Clara's breath stopped. Now. Come back immediately. The call ended. Clara held the phone, her fingertips cold. She suddenly understood that the matter was no longer merely internal company turmoil. It was beginning to collapse in a larger, more uncontrollable direction. Standing in the center of the president's office, with night pressing down outside and the city lights drawing cold white reflections on the glass, Clara's face looked even paler. She rarely felt this way. Not anger. Not shame. It was a near loss of control palpitation. Like standing high up, the ground under your feet still seemingly solid, yet suddenly hearing the foundation crack. She closed her eyes and forced herself to calm down. Then she grabbed her car keys and walked out. The exclusive president's elevator descended all the way. The mirrored wall reflected her tight jawline. Several young women from the secretary department lowered their heads and stepped aside. None dared meet her eyes. Yet she still caught the flash in their gazes. Nervousness. Fear. And undisguised curiosity. She knew what they were thinking. The entire Lu Group was now talking. That she reclaimed her husband's 15% and gave it to a male secretary. That Nathan Pei resigned without looking back. That the legal department had exploded. That the 15% was not the company's at all. In the past, those rumors could be suppressed with one sentence from her. But today, she had an absurd realization. Some things cannot be treated as if they never happened simply because you suppress them. Because they are true. The car drove back to the Lu family estate. At 8 at night, the main hall was brightly lit, yet the atmosphere was as heavy as a funeral hall. Edward Lu sat in the main seat. A black wooden cane lay across his knees. His face was terrifyingly dark. Several Lu family elders were present too. Even branches that rarely appeared had come. They sat in a row, as if waiting to judge her. The moment Clara entered, her steps paused slightly. She instinctively frowned. Dad, what is so serious that you had to make it like this? What is it? Edward suddenly lifted his head. His eyes almost burned with anger. You still have the face to ask me what it is? His cane struck the floor with a loud bang. The entire hall seemed to tremble. Clara Lu, answer me. At today's shareholders' meeting, did you reclaim the 15% equity under Nathan Pei's name and transfer it to Mason Chin? Clara's lips tightened. After a long while, she said coldly. That was an internal company incentive arrangement. Shut up. Edward roared. Even the teacups nearby trembled. Internal company incentive? His chest heaved with anger. Do you know what that 15% is? Do you know whose money saved that equity back then? Do you know what kind of stupidity you committed in front of 43 shareholders today? Clara's heart sank. Her fingers tightened unconsciously. She knew her father valued family reputation and face, but she had not expected such a big reaction. A family elder could not help speaking. Qingwan, you were foolish. The nominee agreement for that 15% had a copy in the family files years ago. How could you not know at all? That sentence tore away the last layer of shame in public. Clara suddenly turned her head. You knew too? For a moment, no one in the hall answered. That brief silence was uglier than any response. So it was not only the shareholders who knew. Even the Liu family elders knew. Only she, the person holding the president's seal, the person always claiming to control everything, did not know. Or perhaps it was not that she did not know. She had simply never seriously looked. Edward stared at her, extreme disappointment in his eyes. 6 years ago, when Liu Group nearly stopped breathing, Nathan Pei used his personal assets to continue your life. The equity was placed under your name to give you face. So that you could speak firmly outside. So people wouldn't point at your back and say you survived by relying on a man. And what did you do? You treated the face he gave you as your own power. You treated his shares as your reward to give. And in front of the entire company, you gave them to a male secretary. The final words were squeezed from between his teeth. You have disgraced the Liu family completely. Clara's face turned pale. Her throat seemed blocked. For a moment, she could not say a word. She had expected her father to scold her. But she had not expected the words, "give you face," to come from his mouth. So in everyone else's eyes, everything she had been proud of for 6 years had been built on Nathan Pei's retreat from the very beginning. Dad. She forced herself to find her voice. Even if that 15% came from his investment, he has no right to freeze the entire company account. Liu Group is not his alone. So even now, you are thinking about accounts, not what you did wrong? Edward looked at her like she was a stranger. Clara, I always thought you were strong because you were capable. Now I realize you are not strong. You are arrogant. You don't even know who invested the most fundamental money into your own company, yet you dared stamp a resolution at the shareholders' meeting to reclaim it? He pointed at her. His fingers trembled. You were not set up by someone else. You handed over the knife yourself and placed your own neck beneath it. The hall was frighteningly quiet. The Liu family elders exchanged glances. No one spoke to persuade him. Because they all knew Edward was truly furious this time. Just then, Clara's phone suddenly rang. The harsh ringtone sounded especially abrupt in the dead silence. She looked down. It was the company CFO. For some reason, her eyelid jumped hard. Edward said coldly, "Answer." Clara pressed accept. Her voice tightened. What happened? The CFO's voice trembled on the other end, almost crying. President Liu. Something happened. Clara's heart sank. Speak clearly. The court's asset preservation notice has just been delivered. All of the company's main operating accounts, backup accounts, and credit-linked accounts have been urgently frozen. What? Clara's face changed sharply. Her voice rose. Everyone in the hall looked over. The CFO was almost incoherent. Not only that. 3 banks sent letters suspending disbursement at the same time. Suppliers also heard the news. The finance center is in chaos. HR just received notice that all shareholder system permissions newly applied for under Secretary Chen's name have also been locked. Clara felt her ears buzz. What about Nathan Pei? Have you contacted him? No. Everything on Mr. Pei's side is handled by lawyers. The legal letter states very clearly that your unauthorized disposal of nominee assets constitutes a major infringement. Before the dispute is clarified, full asset preservation must be conducted first. They're insane. Clara gripped the phone tightly, knuckles white. Full asset preservation? For a dispute over 15% equity, why freeze the whole company? Because. The CFO paused. His voice lowered. More desperate. Because the original investment corresponding to that 15% was not just money. The agreement also ties into multiple guarantees, bridge loans, and supplementary commitments Mr. Pei personally made for Liu Group. Legal calculated that if all of this is traced and reviewed, the company's current asset structure may lose balance entirely. One sentence froze Clara in place. She finally understood. The frozen accounts were not just about the 15%. Nathan Pei had pulled away, overnight, the entire hidden net he had woven under Liu Group for 6 years. She thought she had taken one piece of equity. In reality, she had moved the deepest load-bearing beam of the entire company. There's more. The CFO continued with difficulty. Many people are already gathered in the lobby. Supplier representatives are blocking the front desk. Bank risk control teams and auditors are here. Employees are asking whether this month's wages can still be paid. President Liu, you need to come back quickly. After the call ended, Clara stood still. The screen darkened, reflecting her bloodless face. Edward looked at her. Without asking, he knew what had happened. He closed his eyes, as if aging suddenly. His voice was colder. Frozen? Clara did not answer. Her silence was the answer. A family elder sucked in a cold breath. He really acted. Another smiled bitterly. How could he not? She gave his shares to a secretary in public. Who could bear that? The phrase, gave to a secretary, pierced Clara's ears again like a needle. She suddenly remembered Mason raising his coffee cup toward Nathan's back that morning. At the time, she thought it was the posture of a winner. Now, looking back, it was nothing but an absurd farce. Edward said heavily, "Where is Mason Chin?" Clara pressed her lips together and said nothing. "I asked you. Where is that Mason Chin now?" "I don't know." When she said this, her voice became unsteady for the first time. She truly did not know. From leaving the company until now, she had been dealing with Nathan, the family, and the frozen accounts. She had even forgotten Mason, the biggest beneficiary of the day. The thought appeared, and the uneasy feeling inside her grew stronger. Too coincidental. From encouraging her to expand Mason's permissions, to rejecting Nathan's objections, to using equity incentive as the blade today. Every step seemed to have been pushed quietly beside her ear. She used to think it was consideration. That he understood her. That he supported her unconditionally. But what if it was not? Just then, her phone rang again. This time, it was the president's office assistant. Clara answered almost instantly. "Speak." The assistant's voice shook. "President Liu, Secretary Chin is missing." The hall instantly fell silent. Clara's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "Many of the private items in his office have been cleared out. Technical department also found abnormal access records through several confidential president office ports this afternoon. The core project database and acquisition case database both show traces of external copying. We checked surveillance. Secretary Chin left the company before 6 with a black hard drive bag." Clara's mind exploded. "Keep investigating." She almost shouted. The assistant trembled and hurriedly continued. "We are already investigating. Also, Miss Jiang is here." "Which Miss Jiang?" "From Jiang Group, Jessica Jiang." "No, not her." The assistant was so panicked she misspoke. "It is Chairman Helena Shen of Shen Group. She brought an audit team and people from economic crime investigation into the lobby. She said she wants to see you." Helena Shen. The name fell onto Clara's heart like ice. She knew that name. The woman who had almost become Nathan Pei's fiancée 6 years ago. The childhood sweetheart she had intercepted. And now, that woman came at this moment. Edward's face changed too. "Helena Shen? What is she here for?" Clara gripped the phone until her fingertips almost dug into her palm. Helena Shen. She knew the name too well. 6 years ago, shortly after she had taken over Lu Group, she saw Helena Shen for the first time at a banquet. That woman stood beside Nathan. She wore a dark green dress. Her temperament was cold, noble, and refined. The two standing together looked like a perfectly matched couple from a painting. At that time, everyone said Nathan Pei and Helena Shen were childhood sweethearts, well matched in family background, and only one final procedure away from engagement. It was Clara Liu who, at Lu Group's most difficult moment, used one drunken night and one crossing of boundaries to take that man away from Helena. Only later did she learn that what she had taken was only a shadow willing to hide behind her. That shadow had shielded her from storms for 6 years. Now the shadow had left. And the rightful person had arrived. What is she here for? Clara's voice tightened with suppressed panic. Edward's face was iron blue. Helena Shen has barely appeared publicly in 6 years. Now she suddenly brings audit and economic crime investigators to our door. What do you think she is here for? Clara said nothing. But she already had the answer. For Nathan Pei. Return to the company immediately. Edward stood with his cane. His voice was frighteningly deep. I'll go with you. Clara looked up sharply. Dad, your body. These old bones can still hold. Edward looked at her. There was anger, disappointment, and a trace of care she did not want to face. But if you remain this foolish, Lu Group will truly be finished. No one in the hall stopped him. A person from the second branch whispered. This time, I'm afraid money won't settle it. Someone from the third branch replied. When the Shen family broke off the engagement, they said Nathan Pei owed them an explanation. Helena Shen hasn't acted for 6 years because she was waiting for him to come back himself. Now that he left, how could the Shen family keep tolerating it? Each sentence poured into Clara's ears like a dull knife cutting flesh. She clenched her teeth and walked out. Her heels struck quickly. But every step felt like the ground beneath her was becoming emptier. At 9 that night, Lu Group's tower was brightly lit. The lobby was already filled with people. Supplier representatives. Bank risk control teams. Audit teams. Several serious-looking economic crime investigators. The front desk girls were pale with fear, their voices shaking. The moment Clara entered the lobby, every gaze gathered on her. Some whispered. Some watched blankly. Some faces carried barely hidden pleasure. She walked toward the president's elevator without looking sideways. Then a cold voice came from the side. President Lu. Long time no see. Clara's steps stopped. She turned and saw Helena Shen sitting on the sofa in the lobby reception area. She wore a plain suit. Her long hair was loosely pinned. A cup of tea rested in her hand. Her posture was so calm that she seemed to be waiting for a guest in her own living room. Compared with 6 years ago, her face had barely changed. Only her eyes were deeper, like a bottomless well. Behind her stood a row of people in suits. Auditors. Lawyers. Even economic investigators. All wore serious expressions. Clara suppressed the emotions surging inside her. Chairman Shen, visiting late at night? What is the matter? Helena put down the teacup and stood. She was slightly shorter than Clara, but her aura lost nothing. Nothing major. Her tone was calm. I am here to verify a few accounts. What accounts? The flow of the life-saving money Lu Group received 6 years ago. Helena looked at her. There was no obvious hostility in her eyes. But no warmth either. Also, every guarantee, bridge loan, and supplementary commitment Nathan Pei made in his personal name for Lu Group over the past 6 years. And while I am here, I will collect a debt for him. Clara's heart tightened. What debt? Helena raised a hand. A lawyer behind her passed over a document. You should be familiar with this document. Your legal department verified it this afternoon. Clara took it. Her pupils contracted. It was a supplementary agreement from 6 years ago. When Nathan Pei used his personal assets to guarantee Lu Group, the attached clause stated, if Lu Group suffered losses due to unilateral major decision-making errors during the guarantee period, all guarantees and investments could be withdrawn in full, and joint compensation liability could be pursued. And today's equity reclaim and transfer resolution was clearly included among the defined situations of major decision-making error. In other words, Nathan's decision to freeze the company's accounts today was lawful. In fact, he had not yet acted as harshly as he could. Helena Shen. Clara gripped the document. Her voice turned cold. In what capacity are you collecting debts for him? Helena looked at her. The corner of her lips curved slightly. That smile was faint, but Clara's back tightened instantly. The Pei family has not publicly recognized him these years because he fell out with them. Helena spoke word by word. But the Shen family has. 6 years ago, when he broke off the engagement with me, I agreed because I respected his choice. But the Shen family has one rule. Anyone recognized by our family, no matter how far he walks away, will always have a place to return. Today, he turned back. So I came. She said it lightly. Yet every word fell like stone into Clara's chest. So it was not just the shares. Not just the nominee agreement. Not just Nathan Pei withdrawing alone. Behind him stood the entire Shen family. Helena Shen, the woman whose 6-year engagement Clara had intercepted, now stood in her lobby with auditors, economic investigators, and lawyers to collect everything back for him. Before Clara could speak, hurried footsteps came from the elevator area. The CFO ran over, covered in cold sweat. President Lu, finance has another problem. What now? Clara snapped her head toward him. 3 subsidiaries under the group received court summons this afternoon at the same time. They are suspected of related party transaction violations. The economic investigators are checking the original accounts and may seal part of the financial records. Clara's vision went black for a moment. 3 subsidiaries. She had not heard anything about even one. She suddenly looked at Helena. You did this? Helena's expression did not change. President Liu, I am only here to collect a debt on someone's behalf. As for whether those accounts are clean, you need to ask yourself and your good secretary. Your good secretary. The 3 words stabbed Clara's ears like icicles. Mason Chin. He disappeared with that black hard drive bag. The confidential ports, core project database, and acquisition case database all pointed to copying this afternoon. If those files contained problems. If Mason had buried mines inside the company for 6 years. Clara did not dare think further. She took out her phone and called Mason again. Off. Again. Still off. The man who had told her this afternoon, I will always stand with you, had vanished from the world. Not even a message remained. Where is Mason Chin? Clara suppressed her nearly uncontrolled voice. The CFO lowered his head. We still have not found him. Technical department is tracking the hard drive's data flow. Initial judgment is that it involves financial falsification and fund misappropriation in the 3 subsidiaries. President Liu, the situation may be more serious than we thought. Helena stood beside them. She did not urge. Nor did she mock. She only quietly watched Clara's increasingly pale face, as if watching a trap close exactly as expected. President Liu. Her voice was soft, yet clear. I did not come today to kick you while you are down. Nathan Pei did not ask me to destroy you either. He said one thing. These 6 years were his own choice. He does not blame you. Clara's fingertips trembled. But he also said. 6 years are over. He owes you nothing. From the moment you stamped the president's seal and treated that 15% as charity to give away, every ounce of affection from these 6 years was erased. Clara opened her mouth. Her throat was too dry to produce sound. She suddenly remembered Nathan that morning, standing in the conference room and adjusting his cuffs. That gaze, calm and unfamiliar. His words. No objection. So it had not been compromise. He had already decided. He did not even care to explain one more word. Helena picked up her bag and nodded slightly to Clara. The audit and economic investigation will continue according to procedure. As for Mason Chin, you had better find him quickly. Otherwise, the holes in those 3 subsidiaries will be far bigger than you imagine. After speaking, she turned toward the main doors. The row of lawyers, auditors, and investigators followed in order. Their footsteps were neat and steady, like a trained team. The lobby was terrifyingly quiet. Clara stood in place. Behind her were the doubtful gazes of employees, suppliers, bank representatives, and partners. She suddenly felt cold. Bone-deep cold. Clara did not know how she returned to the president's office. Once the door closed, she almost fell into her chair. Documents were scattered across the desk. Her phone screen lit up, dimmed, and lit up again as message after message arrived. Director Zhao. President Liu, for tomorrow's board meeting, I suggest you prepare. Financial Director. The initial audit results for the 3 companies are out. The situation is extremely unfavorable. I suggest activating an emergency plan immediately. Legal Director. Mr. Pei's legal team has not stopped all day. More preservation measures may follow. There were countless employee messages, supplier messages, media calls. She answered none of them. She only stared at the missed call record at the top of her phone. That number had been saved for 6 years. The note was Nathan Pei. In the past, she almost never called it first. Because he was always beside her. At the back row of meeting rooms. In the office next door. At the corner where he brought her warm milk during late-night overtime. After every decision, calmly adding. There are still a few details to verify. He had been everywhere. So she had never felt he mattered much. Until today. He was gone. Clara closed her eyes. Many images suddenly flashed through her mind. 6 years ago, she collapsed from stomach bleeding after drinking at a banquet. When she woke, Nathan sat beside her bed, holding warm congee, saying nothing. She had thought that was his way of pursuing her. Later, she realized that night was the day she signed the agreement for the life-saving money. 5 years ago, Liu Group first encountered a funding gap in an overseas project. She was in a panic, ready to mortgage assets. The next day, the bank suddenly called and said the credit line had been approved. She thought she was lucky. Later, she vaguely heard that someone flew overnight to the capital and spoke for 4 hours with a distant elder of the Pei family. 4 years ago, Lu Group's acquisition case was attacked by a competitor maliciously lowering the price. She prepared to give up. Then the competitor suddenly withdrew. She thought their funding chain had broken. In reality, someone had handed them a more valuable acquisition route and allowed them to choose retreat. 3 years ago. 2 years ago. 1 year ago. Case after case. She had thought it was her strength, judgment, and luck. But now, sitting alone inside the empty office while the city lights flickered beyond the window, she finally understood. Behind all those moments of good luck stood one person who never spoke. That person had prepared everything. Given all credit to her. Hidden himself behind the title of administrative director. For 6 years. And today, she had personally pushed him away. Her phone rang again. Clara opened her eyes sharply. It was Director Zhao. She answered, voice exhausted to the extreme. Director Zhao, what else? The other end was silent for 2 seconds. Director Zhao's voice sounded slow and heavy, like stone sinking into deep water. President Liu, I just received an internal whistleblower email. Anonymous, but detailed. What does it say? Mason Qin, over the past 3 years, signed at least 4 illegal related party transaction agreements in your name. The amount involved is about 1.2 billion yuan. The beneficiaries of these agreements all point to the same offshore company. And the real controller of that offshore company. You may not guess who it is. Clara gripped the phone hard. Who? Director Zhao was silent again before speaking word by word. Mason Qin himself. He established that company 1 year before he met you. In other words, from his first day at Lu Group, he had already prepared this scheme. Clara shot up from her chair. Evidence? The email attachment contains scans of 3 agreements and fund flow paths. I've already had someone verify preliminarily. At least one agreement truly carries your signature. Impossible. Clara almost shouted. I never signed. Her words stopped. Had she never signed? She suddenly remembered many times over the past 3 years when Mason walked into her office with documents and said, President Liu, these are routine procedures. Just sign here. Sometimes, she did not even read them. She flipped straight to the last page. Because Mason said there was no problem. The words, there is a problem, had never appeared from Mason's mouth. Until today. President Liu. Director Zhao's voice poured over like cold water. This is not Nathan Pei attacking you. It is Mason Qin digging pits behind your back for 3 years. Nathan Pei blocked them for you for 3 years. Today, Nathan Pei left. The pit collapsed. And only then did you realize you were standing on it. Clara slowly sat back down as if all strength had been drained. Director Zhao hung up. Only she remained in the office. And a room full of silence. She picked up her phone and opened the chat with Mason. The last message was sent at around 3 in the afternoon. Mason had said, President Liu, see you tonight. I prepared a good bottle of wine. At the time, she had felt comforted. Now, she only found it absurd. This man had coaxed her into signing illegal agreements while playing the gentle, flawless secretary before her. The black hard drive bag he carried away today probably involved far more than 3 subsidiaries. Those files she personally signed. The money flowing out piece by piece. Together, they were enough to send her to prison. Clara finally realized one thing. What Nathan Pei withdrew was only one man's affection from 6 years. What Mason Qin left behind was a timed bomb powerful enough to ruin her reputation, bankrupt her, and even send her behind bars. She pressed the emergency call button on the president's desk. Everyone, immediately, track Mason Qin with full force. All accounts, real estate, vehicles, communication records under his name, lock them all. Before dawn tomorrow, I want to know where he is. The assistant's trembling voice responded. Yes, President Liu. The call ended. Clara leaned back in her chair and looked up at the ceiling. The crystal lamp was painfully bright, like a pair of merciless eyes shining down on her current disgrace. She suddenly began to regret. Not the shareholders' meeting that morning. But every time over the past 6 years Nathan had reminded her, look again, think again, verify once more. Why had she always interrupted impatiently and said, You're only an administrative director. What do you know? What did he know? He knew everything. She was the one who understood nothing. At 1 in the morning, Lu Group's building remained brightly lit. The technical department's tracing finally produced results. After leaving at 6, Mason had not left the city immediately. He first went to a private club downtown and stayed for about 40 minutes. Then he switched cars and drove south along the highway. Surveillance caught him stopping at 3 service areas. The last time he appeared on camera was around 11 at night near a budget hotel in a small town. President Lu, we already called the police. The assistant's voice shook during the report. But the hotel surveillance system happens to be under maintenance, so. For now, there is no footage of Mason Chin entering a room. Which room did he stay in? Clara's voice was icy. The hotel says he has no check-in record. He used a fake identity. Clara clenched her jaw. He was too prepared. From leaving the company, switching cars, changing identity, choosing surveillance blind spots. Every step was precise, as if rehearsed countless times. This man had hidden by her side for 3 years without leaking a drop. Continue monitoring every entrance and exit in that area. Clara spoke word by word. Also, pull out contact information for all his relatives, friends, university classmates, and former colleagues. Ask them one by one. Yes. After the order, the office quieted again. Clara sat at her desk. Before her lay the emergency documents pulled by the technical department. Mason Chin's resume upon entering Lu Group had been extremely beautiful. Overseas elite university. Experience in 3 major companies. His recommender was a well-known senior executive in the industry. When she first saw that resume, she specifically asked Nathan to conduct background checks. Nathan came back and said, "This person has problems. I don't recommend placing him in the core team." How had she replied? She had said, "You are too conservative. Lu Group needs fresh blood. You cannot reject everyone because you fear problems." Mason Chin's resume looks good, and his interview performance was excellent. Nathan said nothing more. He only placed the background report on her desk and turned away. She never flipped through it. Now, Clara pulled that report from the deepest level of the filing cabinet. A thin layer of dust covered the folder. She opened the first page. Her fingers stopped. In the conclusion section, Nathan's handwritten note was perfectly clear. This person has multiple timeline contradictions in prior work history. During 2 positions, he had access to core financial information. After resignation, related companies showed abnormal capital injections. Highly suspicious. Strongly recommend not hiring. Below that was another smaller line, as if added after long hesitation. Qingwan, trust me this once. The handwriting was rushed. He must have struggled before adding it. She did not trust him. She hired Mason Chin. 3 years later, the man answered her trust with 1.2 billion in misappropriated funds, 3 forged signature agreements, and an entire hard drive of confidential data. Clara gripped the report until her knuckles turned white. She suddenly felt that Nathan had given her countless chances over these 6 years. Every time he said, "Look again," it was a warning. Every time he said, "Don't sign," it was a lifeline. But she had not caught a single one. Not only had she failed to catch them, she had pushed him farther and farther away. So far that today, he did not even bother explaining his resignation. The phone screen suddenly lit up. A new message appeared. It was from Helena Shen. Only 1 sentence. "We found Mason Chin. Your people can't find him, but the Shen family can. Before dawn, I will deliver him to you." Clara stared at that line for a long time. Her first reaction was wariness. Why was Helena helping her? But immediately after, she understood. Helena was not helping her. Not helping Lu Group. Not helping Clara Lu. Helena simply did not want Mason Chin, that piece of filth, to stain Nathan Pei's first night after leaving. That woman came to clean up the mess for Nathan. To sweep this chaos away and give him a clean beginning. Clara suddenly felt that her greatest misjudgment in the past 6 years was not treating Mason as a good secretary. It was never clearly seeing that the woman beside Nathan Pei had never been someone she could steal him from. Helena had only been waiting. Waiting for Nathan to return on his own. At 3 in the morning, Clara received a call from Helena's assistant. "President Lu, Mason Chin has been controlled. He is currently in an abandoned warehouse in North City, preparing to leave by boat before dawn. Our people stopped him. Clara stood abruptly. I'm coming immediately. No need. The other party's tone was calm. Chairman Shen said he will be delivered to the entrance of Lu Group's building. That way, tomorrow morning, all shareholders, employees, suppliers, and bank representatives can personally watch him be taken away. This arrangement was harsher than any secret escort. Helena wanted everyone who witnessed today to see how miserably the secretary who deceived Lu Group for 3 years was brought back. Clara held the phone and remained silent for 2 seconds. Please. Thank Chairman Shen for me. No need. The other party paused. Chairman Shen said this is only to turn the final page of the accounts for Yenchan. Starting tomorrow, his affairs will have nothing to do with Lu Group. And nothing to do with you, President Lu. The call ended. Clara stood before the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the dark night outside. Less than 3 hours remained before dawn. Never in her life had she wanted the sun to rise as desperately as she did now. And never had she feared dawn so much. Because after dawn, what she faced would not only be a captured secretary. There were holes in 3 subsidiaries. A 1.2 billion yuan funding gap. The reckoning of 43 shareholders. Her father's disappointment. The entire Lu Group's crisis. And the man who had completely left and would never look back. But what she did not know was that Nathan Pei had not gone far. At that moment, he stood in the tallest building in the city, before a floor-to-ceiling window, looking toward Lu Group. Cole stood behind him. Mr. Pei, Chairman Shen has already controlled Mason Qin. He will be delivered to the entrance of Lu Group before dawn. Also, the financial issues in those 3 subsidiaries have been fully sorted by the legal team. They will be submitted to economic investigation tomorrow morning. Nathan gave a faint and said nothing else. Cole hesitated. Then he could not help asking. Mr. Pei, are you truly not going to care about Lu Group anymore? Nathan was silent for a moment. His gaze landed on the brightly lit building in the distance. 6 years. He said lightly. I gave her 6 years to learn who around her should be trusted and who should not. But even today, she still does not know how many knives I blocked for her. It is not that she did not know. Cole's heart tightened. It is that she never thought to know. Nathan said nothing. He turned and picked up the suit jacket from the back of the chair. Let's go. Back to the Pei family. Back to the Pei family? Cole froze. Didn't you say? I did not return for 6 years because I did not want them to think I could not live without the Pei family. Nathan's eyes were calm as a lake. Now I return because from now on, I no longer need to hide. Cole opened his mouth. In the end, he said nothing and quickly followed. The elevator doors slowly closed. The mirrored walls reflected Nathan's expressionless face. Outside, the night had begun turning faintly gray. Dawn was coming. At 7, the entrance of Lu Group was already surrounded. Nearly 30 of the 43 shareholders had arrived. Edward Lu sat in a wheelchair pushed by someone from the second branch, his face dark as iron. Supplier representatives crowded at the front. Bank risk control staff stood at the side. Media reporters held long lenses and were blocked outside the security line. Every gaze focused on the black business van parked before the lobby. The door opened. When Mason Qin was brought down, he looked like a drowned dog. His suit was wrinkled like pickled vegetables. His gold-rimmed glasses were missing. His hair stuck messily to his forehead. The smile was completely gone from his face. In its place was near-despairing paleness. He had tried to climb out of a window at the abandoned warehouse last night, but fell onto broken boards and injured one leg. He limped when he walked. The crowd exploded in noise the moment he was brought to the entrance. Is that really him? Isn't that Secretary Qin, the one President Lu rewarded with 15% yesterday? 15%? Ha! Now it's all a joke. I heard he ran with 1.2 billion. 1.2 billion? I've never seen that much money in my life. The discussions surged like tides. Mason lowered his head and dared not look at anyone. Suddenly, the crowd parted automatically. Clara Lu walked out from the lobby. She had changed into a black suit. Her face was pale, but her expression had tightened again. Her jawline was sharp as a blade. She stopped before Mason. The entire scene quieted. Mason lifted his head and met her eyes. His lips moved. President Lu, I. Shut up. Clara's voice was not loud, but it was cold enough to make people shudder. Mason truly did not dare speak again. Clara looked at him and spoke word by word. On your first day at Lu Group, Nathan Pei told me you had problems. I did not believe him. For 3 years, under my eyes, you used 1.2 billion yuan to buy through 3 subsidiaries, forged my signature, and signed 4 illegal related party transaction agreements. I discovered none of it. Not because you hid well. Because I was blind. When the final 2 words came out, the surroundings were dead silent. Even the reporters forgot to press their shutters. Clara suddenly smiled faintly. The smile was uglier than crying. I am standing here today not to settle accounts with you. Economic investigation will settle accounts. The court will settle accounts. Financial audit will settle accounts. I am here only to tell you one thing. You used the gap after Nathan Pei left to run. You thought I could not find you. But you did not know, when he placed his resignation letter on the table, he had already cut off all your escape routes. You cannot run. From the first day you started deceiving me, you could not run. Mason's face turned completely gray. He suddenly dropped to his knees with a thud. President Liu, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. I can return the money. I can find a way to return it. Return it? Clara looked down at him like watching a dying insect. 1.2 billion. What will you use to return it? The offshore account that has already been frozen? The 7 properties under your name that have already been seized? Mason shook violently. You? How do you know? How do I know? Clara sneered. Because before you ran, Nathan Pei had already organized all fund flows, account lists, and asset details from the past 3 years and handed them to economic investigators. You thought you were exposed today. In reality, 3 months ago, you were already investigated down to the bone. He was waiting. Waiting for you to bury yourself deeper. Waiting for you to walk into darkness yourself. Waiting for you to tear things apart today. Then he would throw all evidence from these 3 years in your face at once. Mason collapsed onto the ground, unable to speak. Clara stepped back and raised a hand toward the people behind her. Hand him over to economic investigation. 2 legal staff stepped forward and pulled Mason from the ground. At that moment, footsteps came from behind the crowd. Helena Shen got out of a white car and walked to Clara's side. She looked at Clara once and said lightly, "There is one more thing you may need to know." Clara turned her head. What? Helena took out a document and handed it over. These are fund transfer records between Mason Qin and Jessica Jiang over the past 3 years. Clara took it. Her pupils shrank. Jessica Jiang. Her cousin. For years, Jessica had claimed to be weak and uninvolved in company affairs. She held an idle position in Lu Group, drew a high salary every month, and almost never came to work. Out of family affection, Clara had never investigated her. But this record showed that nearly 40% of Mason's 1.2 billion yuan funds had passed through Jessica Jiang's accounts. In other words, there was more than one mole. Clara gripped the document until her fingers whitened. Helena's voice remained calm. Mason's external network is deeper than you imagined. Lu Group has looked glamorous in recent years, but it was already hollowed out underneath. If he had not run today, this layer may not have been pierced yet. Clara closed her eyes. Several seconds later, when she opened them again, the panic in her eyes had been suppressed. In its place was a cold, clear sobriety. Where is Jessica Jiang now? The assistant checked immediately and changed color. Miss Jiang left the country from the airport at 6 this morning. She flew overseas. Bring her back. We are already contacting the relevant departments, but she holds an overseas passport. The process may be slow. Slow or not, bring her back. She cannot run. Helena looked at her reaction. Something complicated flashed in her eyes. This woman finally started to look like a president. Only the price had been too heavy. At 9 in the morning, an emergency board meeting was called. This time, Clara did not sit in the main seat. She gave the main seat to Edward Liu. She sat in the first seat to his right. Before her lay a 47-page audit report. Before the meeting began, Director Zhao spoke first. President Liu, we are not kicking you while you are down. But in front of all shareholders, you gave equity to a fraud. This is no longer simply a decision-making mistake. It is major dereliction of duty. Another old shareholder followed. Now Mason Qin has been caught, the 1.2 billion hole cannot be filled, and 3 subsidiaries are facing shutdown. How will you solve this? Clara raised her head and swept her gaze across the room. This time, she did not use force to suppress anyone as she had yesterday. She only calmly said one sentence. I will fill the 1.2 billion hole. I will save those 3 subsidiaries. As for Mason Chin and Jessica Jiang, whatever legal process applies will apply. As for the suspended businesses, I will personally lead the team to repair them one by one. The room fell silent. Director Zhao narrowed his eyes. How will you fill it? Lu Group's accounts are frozen. What will you use? All assets under my personal name. Clara's voice was not high, but every word was clear. The old Lu family house I inherited 6 years ago, for private properties, 2 cars at market value, and all savings in my personal accounts have been entrusted for collateral valuation this morning. On both sides of the meeting table, people sucked in cold breaths. She knew what this meant. It meant she was prepared to lose everything. Edward sat in the main seat and looked at his daughter. There was anger and disappointment in his eyes. But finally, a trace of something he had not shown in a long time appeared. Relief. This child finally understood what it meant to shoulder responsibility. Not using power to suppress people, but using everything she could give to patch the hole she had caused. Director Zhao was silent for a long time before slowly nodding. President Liu, since you have this attitude, we old men will not push you too hard. Mason Chin's case was a scam. You are not the only one bearing fault. But the shareholders need an explanation. The company needs direction. I will give one. Clara said. Within 3 days, I will present a complete restructuring plan. If the shareholders are not satisfied after 3 days, I will resign from the position of president automatically. The moment that sentence landed, the room fell silent again. No one questioned her further. Because everyone could see Clara was not acting. She was truly prepared to use everything she had to exchange for one path of survival for Lu Group. After the meeting ended, Clara sat alone in the empty conference room. Her phone screen glowed. It showed the last message from Helena Shen. Mason Chin's case has been handed over to economic investigation. The remaining process will be handled by law. How much of Lu Group's 1.2 billion loss can be recovered depends on how much his assets can be liquidated. But there is one thing Nathan Pei asked me to tell you. Clara stared at the line. Her breathing tightened slightly. He said, he saw your decision today. He will not kick Lu Group's boat over. The guarantees and bridge loans will be unfrozen with his cooperation. But he will not take back the 15% nominee equity. Because that money was his from the beginning. He does not need to use this method to prove ownership. He will only take away one thing, his name from these 6 years. From today on, Lu Group has no director Pei. The Pei family also no longer has that second son who disappeared for 6 years. Clara held her phone. Her eyes suddenly stung. The tears she had held back all day finally fell silently. Helena's final sentence arrived. Nathan Pei asked me to pass along 8 final words. 6 years of affection end here. The phone screen dimmed. Only Clara remained in the meeting room. Sunlight passed through the blinds and fell across her face in alternating strips of light and shadow. The tear track glowed faintly. She suddenly remembered 6 years ago, the day Nathan put his money into Lu Group. It had also been a bright morning like this. He had stood before her and said his first sentence. You do not need to thank me. I want to help you. How had she replied? She had said coldly. I don't need anyone's help. Lu Group is mine alone. Nathan had not argued. He had only smiled lightly. That smile was faint. Almost indulgent. She had thought it was his concession to her. Only now did she understand. After carrying everything for her, he had willingly stepped behind her for the last time. That same morning, at the Pei family estate. The estate sat on the quietest hillside in the city. Blue bricks. Dark tiles. Deep courtyards. Dense leaves from an old locust tree covered half the sky. When Nathan walked in, the old housekeeper watering the courtyard froze. The watering can almost fell from his hand. Second, young master? Nathan nodded. His voice was soft. Is father here? Yes, yes. The old housekeeper nodded repeatedly. His voice shook with excitement. Master is in the study. Please wait, I'll report. Nathan did not wait. He walked directly through the courtyard. After 6 years away, he could still walk this path with his eyes closed. The study door was half open. When he pushed it in, old Master Pei was sitting by the window in a grand wooden chair, wearing reading glasses and flipping through an old newspaper. Hearing the door, he looked up. His gaze stopped. Father and son stared at each other for almost 10 seconds. Neither spoke first. Old Master Pei slowly set down the newspaper and removed his glasses. His voice was heavy. 6 years. 6 years. You finally decided to come back? Nathan was silent for a moment. I decided. Old Master Pei stared at him for a long time. Then he snorted. I thought you would spend your whole life working yourself to death for that woman from the Liu family. Nathan did not defend himself. He only walked to the window and stood beside his father. Outside, the old locust tree blocked half the sunlight, casting uneven shadows over them. Dad. I'm sorry. Nathan spoke calmly. These 6 years made you worry. Old Master Pei's eyes suddenly reddened. But he quickly turned away, using a cough to hide it. His voice deliberately remained cold. What worry? I treated it as if I never had this son. His words were harsh, but his hand instinctively reached out and patted Nathan's arm. The touch was very light. As if afraid that, if he used too much strength, the person would leave again. Nathan lowered his eyes. He did not dodge. Footsteps came from the courtyard. Mrs. Pei almost ran inside, followed by several uncles and aunts of the Pei family. Every face was emotional. Yan Chan. Mrs. Pei grabbed his hand and looked him up and down. You've lost weight. So much weight. What kind of life have you been living outside all these years? Nathan let her hold his hand and said gently. Mom, I've been fine. Fine? Mrs. Pei's tears fell. You didn't come home for 6 years. Even during New Year, you only called briefly and hung up. I asked whether you ate well, lived well, and you always said you were fine. If you were truly fine, would you have lost this much weight? Nathan said nothing. He only raised a hand and patted his mother's back gently. Uncle Pei sighed. It's good that you're back. Your room, your mother has people clean it every day. She always says that if one day you return, you must not feel wronged when you stay there. A faint ripple flashed quickly through Nathan's eyes. Then he said softly. Thank you, Mom. Mrs. Pei cried even harder. Old Master Pei sat in the grand chair. Watching the room of people gather around his second son, he said nothing. But the corners of his eyes quietly curved. After everyone's emotions calmed slightly, Uncle Pei came closer and asked in a low voice. Yan Chan, regarding Liu Group. Are you truly not going to care anymore? Nathan thought for a moment. Then he said lightly. I already helped her sort out the accounts. If she can fill the hole, she fills it. If she cannot, it is no longer my responsibility. As for the 15% nominee equity, I will not take it back for now. But this is the last time. Why? His uncle did not understand. That money was yours. Because 6 years ago, that money was invested to save her. Nathan said. Since it saved her, there is no need to take it back. But from now on, Liu Group has nothing to do with me. His uncle looked at him for a while, then suddenly laughed. Good. With that sentence, I can relax. Your father has never said it aloud these years, but what he feared most was that you were still trapped in it. Seeing you like this today, he is truly relieved. Nathan did not respond. He turned and looked through the study window at the city skyline below the mountain. The Liu Group building stood far away in the city center, like a white needle piercing the sky. He looked at it for several seconds. Then withdrew his gaze. 3 days later, at Liu Group, Clara sat in the president's office. Before her lay a thick restructuring plan. She had led the core team through 72 hours without rest. Red eyes. Hoarse voices. 5 pounds lost. Finally, before the deadline, they completed it. The plan was clear. Peel the 3 problematic subsidiaries away from core business. Introduce new investors for restructuring. Compress unprofitable segments. Concentrate all resources on the main track. Most importantly, she gave up 80% of her president's salary and announced no dividends for the next 3 years. All profits would be used to fill the hole. When the plan was submitted to the board, Director Zhao read it in silence for a long time. Finally, he said only 6 words. President Liu, you've grown up. 6 simple words. Yet they made Clara's nose sting. She forced herself not to lose control and only nodded. If the shareholders agree, we can vote today. The vote passed unanimously. Even those who had questioned her, mocked her, and waited to see her fall all signed, agree, on their ballots. Because they saw the attitude a president should have. Not throwing blame wildly. Not forcibly escaping responsibility. Not suppressing people with power. But truly binding her own fate to the company. After the meeting, Director Zhao deliberately stayed until the end. He walked to Clara and said softly, "There is one more thing you may not know." "What?" The day Mason Chin was captured, before Helena Shen brought economic investigators into the company, she first met Nathan Pei. Someone heard Nathan say one sentence. Clara lifted her eyes. "What did he say?" Director Zhao looked at her and said slowly. He said, "As long as Clara Liu is willing to carry responsibility once, Liu Group still has a chance to be saved. If she continues pushing blame away, then let Liu Group dissolve." Clara's hand tightened around the document. "He gave you one final chance." Director Zhao patted her shoulder. "You caught it." After Director Zhao left, the meeting room became quiet again. Clara sat at the end of the empty long table and suddenly remembered something. 3 days earlier, when she publicly rewarded Mason with the 15% at the shareholders' meeting, the room had been just as quiet. But that silence had been dead still. Now, this was rebirth. She closed the restructuring plan, stood, and walked to the window. The city spread beneath her feet. The sunlight was bright, illuminating the entire building. She suddenly remembered Nathan's back when he left. That man wore a dark gray suit. His steps were steady. He did not turn back. At the time, she thought he had lost. Now she understood. It was the back of a man who had recovered all his dignity, walking slowly back to the place that had always belonged to him. And what she could do was protect the land he had left her one last time. 1 month later, Liu Group's crisis was basically resolved. The restructuring of the 3 subsidiaries landed smoothly. Almost 90% of the 1.2 billion funding hole was recovered. All assets under Mason Chin's name were seized and auctioned. Jessica Jiang was stopped overseas and extradited back, now facing criminal prosecution. Most of Clara's personal collateral was released. But she did not withdraw her first promise to surrender most of her salary. She continued receiving the company's minimum salary and worked more than 16 hours a day. The company's attitude toward her changed completely. Before, employees feared and respected her. But most of that respect had been distant, born of intimidation. Now, when they saw her still working in her office at dawn, taking a 10-minute nap on her desk at noon before returning to meetings, personally visiting suppliers and banks one by one to explain the situation, that distance slowly became something else. Respect. True respect. One night, several girls from the secretary department worked overtime until late. They secretly ordered takeout and added 1 extra portion. They placed it outside the president's office door. When Clara opened the door, she saw a bowl of hot congee and a small note. "President Liu, please take care of yourself." She stood at the door and stared at the bowl for a long time. Then she picked it up and took a sip. It was warm. The rice had been cooked soft. White congee. The thing she used to hate most. But that night, she finished the entire bowl. The next day, she adjusted salaries company-wide. All frontline employees received a 5% raise. She said, "Everyone worked hard during this period. You deserve it." No one said anything else. Everyone simply worked better in silence. Another half-month later, Helena Shen happened to pass by Liu Group and stopped upstairs for a while. The 2 women sat facing each other in the president's office. The atmosphere was much calmer than 1 month earlier. Helena held her tea and glanced at Clara. "I heard you separated out the 15% nominee equity." Clara nodded. "The industrial registration has been changed. The actual rights holder is clearly listed as Nathan Pei. I never occupied it for a single day. And never will." Helena did not respond directly. Instead, she smiled lightly. "You changed a lot." "Did I?" "Before, when you spoke, you always carried an air of, 'I am right.' Now that air is gone. But you are steadier." Clara was silent for a while. Then she said softly, "The fall hurt too much. I no longer dare stand that high." Helena looked at her for a long time. Finally, she set down the teacup and said lightly, Nathan Pay is getting engaged next month. Clara's fingers paused slightly on the cup. To a distant niece of the Shen family. Helena's tone was calm. Don't overthink it. It isn't me. My engagement with him ended long ago. I had no intention of getting back together over those 6 years, and I won't in the future. That niece in my family has a gentle personality. She doesn't fight or compete. She suits him well. Clara lowered her eyes. She said nothing. Helena stood and patted her shoulder. I came today only to tell you this. From now on, you two are on separate roads. He walks his. You walk yours. Don't look back. And don't delay each other. Clara nodded softly. Helena reached the door, then suddenly turned back. Clara Lu. You actually do not owe him anything. Those 6 years were his own choice. You did not deceive him. You only saw him too late. After speaking, she pushed the door open and left. Clara sat alone in the office. Outside the window, the setting sun fell perfectly, coating the entire room in warm gold. She closed her eyes. A scene from many years ago appeared in her mind. Shortly after taking over Lu Group, she had been caught in the rain downstairs. She walked into the office soaking wet. Nathan handed her a towel. She took it and casually wiped her hair without even saying thank you. He simply stood beside her and looked at her. There had been a faint smile in his eyes. Very faint. Like moonlight in the mountains. So gentle it was almost invisible. She had not understood then. Now she did. But that person had already gone very, very far. Another month later, Lu Group released its annual financial report. The data was not spectacular. But after such a storm, stabilizing the base already shocked many people. The stock price did not crash. Instead, it rose because of the news that the president had surrendered most of her salary to save the company. Media headlines became more dramatic than the next. Lu Group's female president risks everything to save company, recovers 90% of 1.2 billion whole. From rewarding a secretary to filling the hole, Clara Lu's comeback from the edge. Truth behind the Pei family's second son's 6-year hidden marriage. Did Clara Lu push away her strongest support? Clara accepted no interviews. She put all her energy into company operations. She arrived early, left late, and focused more than anyone during meetings. Occasionally, when passing by the former administrative director's office, her steps would pause. But soon, she would move past faster. That office had been converted into a small meeting room. No trace of Nathan Pei remained inside. She had personally ordered everything cleared. Because she felt that since he had left, nothing should remain that would make him feel awkward if he ever returned. He would not return. She knew that better than anyone. That evening, Clara left work half an hour earlier than usual. She went alone to the small plaza downstairs and sat for a while on the bench beside the fountain. Dusk deepened. City lights lit one by one, like a flowing golden river. Her phone vibrated. She looked down. It was a news notification. The title was short. Pei family's second son Nathan Pei holds engagement banquet with Shen heiress today. Low-key and warm, only close family invited. Clara stared at the line for a long time. Her fingertip hovered above the screen. In the end, she did not open it. She turned the phone face down on her lap and raised her head. The last bit of sunset sank slowly. The cloud edges were dyed pale purple, beautiful like a painting. She thought. The first day she met Nathan Pei 6 years ago had also been a dusk like this. That day, she had just signed a financing deal and thought she had won the whole world. She did not know that the person who truly won had always stood behind her, silently watching her smile. Even less did she know that that smile would last 6 years. Now, it was over. The streetlight beside the bench snapped on. Warm yellow light fell over her and stretched her shadow into a thin, long line. Clara stood, patted away dust that did not exist on her skirt, and walked toward the subway station. She did not drive today. She wanted to walk. To walk back to the apartment she had lived in for 6 years. On the way, she passed a flower shop. After hesitating, she went in and bought a bouquet of white daisies. She held the flowers in her arms and continued forward. In 6 years, she had never bought flowers for anyone. Today was the first time. Because the person who deserved flowers was no longer there. She could only buy them for herself. As a formal farewell to those 6 years. When she reached the apartment building, she suddenly stopped. From the mailbox by the hallway entrance, one corner of a white envelope stuck out. She froze. Then she walked over and pulled it out. There was no signature. No sender. Only one handwritten line. Clara Lou, these 6 years were my own choice. Live well. The handwriting was clean and straight. Like that man's character. Gentle, yet impossible to negotiate with. Clara held the letter under the streetlight. Her nose reddened slightly. In the end, she did not cry. She only folded the letter and placed it carefully inside her bag. Then she carried the daisies upstairs. When the light turned on, the apartment felt warm. The city night outside gently surrounded the windows. Clara placed the daisies into a glass vase and set them in the most visible spot near the entrance. Then she walked into the study, opened her computer, and continued processing the documents needed for tomorrow. The screen light reflected on her face. Her expression was calm and focused, even carrying a softness she had never had before. In the entryway, the white daisies trembled lightly in the night breeze. Their petals opened slightly, as if saying a final goodbye on someone else's behalf. Across the city, the Pei family estate was brightly lit. The engagement banquet was nearing its end. Guests were leaving one after another. Nathan Pei wore a dark gray suit and stood beneath the old locust tree in the courtyard. He held a wine glass. His expression was calm as he looked into the distance. The niece from the Shen family walked over and asked gently, "Brother Yenchan, are you tired? Do you want to go rest first?" Nathan turned to look at her and smiled. "I'm fine. Go keep the elders company. I'll stand here for a while." The girl nodded obediently and returned to the house. The courtyard quieted again. Only the chirping of insects and the wind through leaves remained. Nathan lifted his hand, drank the final sip of wine, and placed the empty glass on the stone table. The moonlight was bright. It stretched his shadow long across the ground. He raised his head and looked once toward the end of the skyline. The white tower of Lu Group was faintly visible in the night. Like the tip of a distant needle. Like a light about to fade. He looked at it for several seconds. Then withdrew his gaze. Turned. And walked back into the brightly lit hall. The door closed softly behind him. Outside, the night wind continued blowing. The city lights remained. Everything from those 6 years quietly turned into the past. That's all for today's story. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment.